So your voice is breaking, sir. So can you repeat it once again?
Junior resident at Department of Palliative Medicine in New Delhi.
Sir, you are working in palliative medicine in New Delhi, right?
Yeah, junior resident.
Sorry, sir, I didn't get it.
Can you please type it in the chat box?
Hello. Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, sir, you are.
I'm a junior resident.
Okay. Which?
Department of Palliative Medicine, AIMS, New Delhi.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome, sir. Dr. Anushka. Dr. Anushka, can you give you a brief introduction about yourself?
Hello, hi, I'm speaking from Sri Lanka. I am a doctor involved in anesthetics.
Can you repeat it once again?
Lanka. I am a doctor involved in anesthetics.
Welcome, doctor. Dr. Alexina. Dr. Alexina, can you unmute and speak?
Yes. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can.
Yeah, I'm working at Cancer Hospital in Sri Lanka. I'm a medical officer in palliative unit.
Welcome, doctor.
Okay, nice to see you.
Hello. Dr. Asila. Doctor, we can hear you. Can you speak?
Hello.
Yes, doctor.
Yes, I'm Dr. Anushka Fernando. I'm working in Sri Lanka, Base Hospital Kathakuri. We're gonna start a COVID unit soon, so I'm gonna working in a COVID unit.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Asila. Who have logged in as Galaxy A7? Dr. Kamrul Hassan. Dr. Kamrul Hassan, doctor, can you unmute and speak? Dr. Chamath. Doctor, can you unmute and speak? Dr. Chamath.
Chamath is a family physician and lecturer in family medicine for University of Sri Jayawardenepura from Sri Lanka, and his special interest is in palliative medicine. Have completed PG diploma at Cardiff University. Currently following PhD in palliative care. Okay, thank you, Dr. Chamath. And Dr. Asela is working at National Cancer Institute, Sri Lanka in the palliative care. Thank you, Dr. Asela.
Dr. Chitra and Dr. Sunita.
I'm a psychiatrist as well as a palliative care physician. I'm based in Cochin, Kerala.
Hello, I'm Dr. Sunita. I am a palliative care physician based in Cochin.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Biju Raghavan.
Biju Raghavan here. Hi. Dr. Biju Raghavan here, a consultant in pain and palliative medicine at Rajagiri Hospital in Kerala.
Thank you, sir.
जोखिम होने तक में palliative medicine में आते हैं.
Dr. Sandeep.
Myself, a family physician with the tropical medicine based out of Delhi.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, sir.
So, welcome you all to this third series of COVID ECHO. So, this ECHO is a joint collaboration between Palim India and Pali-COVID Kerala. Palim India is a nationally registered charitable organization with its headquarters at Trivandrum. Pali-COVID is a group of interested physicians who actually work towards symptom control, how to attain symptom control in COVID-19, because there are many aspects of suffering in COVID-19, including physical, psychological, social, financial, and spiritual problems. So, Pali-COVID as a group has come up with some guidelines to control the symptoms in COVID-19. So today's session will be handled by Dr. Rajashree, and she is an anesthesiologist, but she has been working in palliative care for more than 20 years. She has currently she is working as the assistant professor in Amrita Institute of Medical Sciences and at Institute of Palliative Medicine, Thrissur, and also at Trivandrum Institute of Palliative Sciences. So she will be talking about the relevance of palliative care in COVID-19 and few symptoms like pain, fever, and secretions. So welcome, madam, and it's over to you.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ma'am, just a second. I will be sharing the screen soon.
Okay. Meanwhile, thank you, Sunil, again, and thanks, ECHO team from Trivandrum Institute of Palliative Science, and thanks to my team members at Pali-COVID who were instrumental in making the guidelines, as Sunil had already mentioned, and enable me to do the presentation today. Concepts of COVID-19 are keeping on changing every day. So we have to get updated. So please follow the link to the video. Hope that will be shared with you. We have uploaded the version 1. According to the current updation, we will be updating the latest details.
Share.
Madam, can you make some adjustment with your microphone? Can you keep it near your mouth?
Am I audible now?
Yes, now it is better.
Is it clear?
Yes.
So please let me know whether I am audible or not.
Yeah, now you are clear.
Okay. Okay. So the first session of the third series for ECHO Pali-COVID program for palliative care guidelines for COVID-19 patients. So here I am supposed to speak on palliative care in the context of a pandemic, that is COVID-19, and principles of symptom control and symptom management of certain symptoms, not all symptoms too. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are.
Having said that, I would like to highlight certain points. This is a platform to share the palliative care aspect of COVID-19. It is an acute illness too. Palliative care is traditionally believed as supporting care for patients with chronic illness. But of late, we have in an acute illness like COVID-19 too. Am I audible?
Your voice is breaking in between.
Just a minute, sorry. Am I audible now?
Madam, if can you do it on your mobile phone only with audio?
I am doing it on my mobile phone only.
Okay.
Am I audible now?
Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are. You can continue.
Okay. Please let me know if there is a break. Okay.
Sure, ma'am.
Okay. So here in the 6 sessions of the series, we are going to highlight mainly on the palliative care aspect of the pandemic and also on symptom control and psychosocial support, triage and goal setting, and end-of-life care, grief, bereavement support, etc. This is a platform to share the palliative care guidelines, principles, and practices. We are not skilled in deciding or debating on the role of chloroquine, whether it is effective for chemoprophylaxis or the treatment strategy, what kind of ventilation is required for COVID-19 patients, whether it is pressure support, CPAP, or PPAP. We are not adapting that. And I request all of you to confine this platform to be used to discuss the palliative care concept.
Madam, 1 minute.
Hello.
Madam, it's not very clear. So can you do one thing? Can you take this presentation through audio of the mobile only, and if you have a laptop in front of you, so that you can have your presentation also. We will share the presentation from here.
No problem. Am I audible now?
Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Again, I would like to highlight, this is not a platform to debate on the efficacy of vitamin C or vitamin D in preventing or delaying COVID-19. Okay, we are going to strictly adhere to palliative care principles. So please share your experience either from your palliative care background or encounter with COVID-19 patients. That is most, because we also have to enrich our knowledge on palliative care aspects of COVID-19. Is that fine? Am I audible?
Your voice is not very clear.
Sunil, I don't know what to do because I'm sitting in the port.
You don't use, we will call you from here so that the call will be connected, and you just keep your presentation in front of you, and but you need not connect it to the internet. So you will talk through the phone, not through Zoom platform.
Oh my God, that could be.
Possible?
Sunil, am I audible right now?
You are audible for a second, but your voice is breaking in between and it's not clear.
So, shall I start again with the first slide? Let us see.
Yeah. Okay.
Is it clear now?
It's clear.
Okay. So let me, please tell me what should I do?
Vishnu will tell you.
Madam. മാഡത്തിന് ഇപ്പം ഫോൺ ത്രൂ വഴി സൂമിൽ വിളിക്കുമ്പോൾ മാഡം ആ ഫോൺ അറ്റൻഡ് ചെയ്തിട്ട് ശേഷം +1 ചെയ്യാം. എന്നിട്ട് മാഡത്തിന്റെ ഫ്രണ്ടിലേക്ക് ലാപ്ടോപ്പ് ഓപ്പൺ ചെയ്ത് അവിടെ നിന്ന് പ്രസന്റേഷൻ മാം പറഞ്ഞാൽ മതി. ഇവിടെ നമ്മൾ നെക്സ്റ്റ് സ്ലൈഡ് പറയുമ്പോൾ ഇവിടെ നമ്മൾ മാറ്റിക്കോളാം.
Yes, Vishnu, I might find it difficult to coordinate, is it not at all audible there? I'm just sitting on my porch and am I audible right now?
Voice is breaking.
Breaking, ma'am.
മാഡം ഫോണിൽ കൂടെ സംസാരിക്കുന്ന പോലെ സംസാരിച്ചാൽ മതി.
Hello.
ഹലോ
Hello.
ആ ഹലോ.
Hello. Hello.
You are audible but it's breaking.
Hello. Is it clear now?
Yeah. It's
It is
clear
clear
for
now. It is clear now.
Hello.
Yes, madam.
Raji, it is clear now.
Okay. Let me start with a story. This is Mr. C, who is a 60-year-old small-scale businessman from Central Kerala. He's a diabetic for past 10 years and hypertensive for past 8 years. And he approaches Nodal Hospital with complaints of fever, malaise, and cough for past 5 days duration. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. So he was tested positive for COVID-19. Next. His history was the contact with another positive patient 3 weeks ago. Actually, that particular patient was under quarantine. He met that patient who is his friend as well. Without his knowledge, he contaminated the infection from him. Am I audible?
You are audible but with low volume.
No, doctor, it's really cracking. The voice is not clear at
Here and just tell me what to do.
Madam, ഞാൻ ഇപ്പൊ വിളിക്കാം. Can you take the call?
Yes, of course.
Please wait for a moment. Sorry for the interruption. We will sort it out now.
Yes, yes, you are very much
Am I
audible.
audible to me?
Yes, yes, you are audible.
Okay. So let me start with Mr. C's story. I will start from the beginning. Mr. C is a 60-year-old small-scale businessman from Central Kerala. He has been a diabetic for past 10 years and a hypertensive for past 8 years. And he approaches Nodal Hospital with complaints of fever, malaise, and cough for 5 days duration. Is it clear?
Yes, yes, you
Is
are
it clear?
Yes, ma'am. You are clear.
He was tested positive. He was tested positive for COVID-19. And history was the contact with another positive patient who was quarantined about 3 weeks ago. And actually this particular positive patient had met him during a family function, which resulted in contamination of the disease. And this happened without the knowledge of Mr. C. Next. He was sent to isolation ward and then moved to critical care unit as his saturation dropped. Next slide. So now let us think, what does the test result mean to the treating team? For the treating team, particularly for doctors, they are quite busy. They have empty list which have to be finalized. Regarding prognostication factors, the age of the patient, status of diabetes and hypertension, CT findings of pulmonary parenchyma to decide upon the alveolar damage, blood parameters, the routine metabolic parameters, and the parameters with specificity to COVID-19, urine output, oxygen saturation. Regarding treatment protocol, the pharmacological agents, which are quite conflicting because of the lack of evidence, oxygen therapy, ventilation, whether it has to be non-invasive ventilation or controlled. Next. So what about Mr. C? Next, he is left in utmost care. Is it clear?
Yes, clear.
So coming to my next slide. So what does the test result mean to Mr. C? Next, that is physical, fever, muscle pain, shortness of breath, and loss of control. He is febrile, he is weak, he has got myalgia, he has got difficulty in breathing, and more than any of this, he has lost the control of everything, even the control of himself. Next, psychological, he is utterly scared and anxious. It is about self and the family as well. He is sad because he is not sure he will be able to meet his family. He is angry because why that particular friend attended that function. He himself feels guilty that he had gone and attended the function. Next. He has got social factors as well. He may lose the job and income, and he is pretty well isolated from the rest of the world. Is it clear?
Yes, clear.
I need an answer. Next. And the spiritual, the most innate, subtle, sensitive, and unique of each and every individual. Why me? Why should it happen to me? In the conventional medical practice, all these are scattered. And we being the professionals, particularly doctors, we give focus only onto the physical symptoms. How we can reduce the temperature, how we can abate his pain, how we can reduce his shortness of breath, and rest everything is left behind. So everything is scattered but for Mr. C, it is everything together. Separately. So what about his family now? The family also is separated from the loved one. There is no appropriate information sharing. They will be loaded with information flooding from here and there, the social media, newspapers, and everywhere they will be getting information. But they will not be given enough and appropriate information about what is happening to Mr. C. That is the most important thing which they want. They are not getting it. Uncertainty about the outcome of Mr. C with their loved one and the future. Future means not only the outcome of the patient, future about themselves, their family, their social status, their income, children's education, everything is under care. The family also is quarantined. They are also cut off from the rest of the civil society and they have to face a stigma and many more issues which we are not at sea because it's the first time the pandemic hits our country as well. Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
I need an answer, please. Am I clear?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Okay. Please be in alignment with me. I am in alignment with you while sharing the screen.
Yes.
I need an answer. Just let me know whether I am in alignment with you.
Yes. Raji, can you hear me? Yes.
Next slide, please. World Health Organization, we know
they have defined health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. All of us have learned, studied, and probably we might have taken oath while we got graduated. But we simply forgot everything and we focus only on the physical issue. Next slide, please. And we know illness strikes not only the body, it is a total human experience. The impact is more with chronic illness, but it is not that less with acute illness as well. Next, it is physical. Next, it is psychological. Next, it is social. Next, it is spiritual as well. And we, in palliative care, we encompass everything together so as to give a holistic care to the patient. Apart from looking at only on physical aspects, we take all the aspects together, of physical, psychological, spiritual, social, everything together, so as to give a humanistic and holistic picture by the care being delivered. Next slide, please. Palliative care in 2002 is being defined by World Health Organization as an approach that improves the quality of life of the patient and their relatives facing the problems associated with life-threatening or life-limiting illnesses through the prevention and relief of suffering by means of early identification, impeccable assessment, and treatment. We are quite familiar with this definition. In 2017, Lancet Commission brought palliative care under universal health coverage, and they have redefined or recoined the term of life.
Your voice is gone.
Dr. Rajasri have logged out. I hope she will logging in soon. Dr. Rajasri, can you hear us?
Am I audible?
Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
So Lancet Commission in 2017, they have brought palliative care under universal health coverage, and they have redefined the terminology of life-threatening and life-limiting illnesses to any serious health-related suffering. So it gave more focus to human suffering than to an illness. I mean, illness itself is an experience. Anyway, that particular redefining the term has brought more focus onto suffering from a disease, illness as an experience. It happened in 2018. Next slide, please. Palliative care in the continuum, it focuses on the care pattern which starts at the time of diagnosis. It also gives some focus onto the preventive aspect as well. I mean, like adopting healthy lifestyle with respect to COVID-19, like wearing masks when we go out in public, using hand sanitizers, frequent hand washing when you feel that your hands or feet and when it gets contaminated. So these healthy lifestyle are also given equal importance. And being quarantined or being the lockdown is also a part of, like a preventive strategy or preventive health style. So palliative care, it starts at the time of diagnosis. Its dimension or domain, it increases as the illness trajectory worsens, and its impact becomes profound or tremendous as the patient approaches the last days or end of life phase. And it continues even after the death of the patient as bereavement support. Okay, it is very much applicable to any illness which has got a chronic spectrum. But it is applicable to COVID pandemic also, because palliative care has got a role at the time of commencement, diagnosis of the illness itself. Because the patient is going to have lots of psychological problems, and the goals of care has to be decided when the patient is being transferred to the hospital. That is why we have triage system. So at every moment, the palliative care principles, the communication strategies, and the family and the patient support, everything has got its own value. So palliative care has got profound impact in an acute illness like a pandemic like COVID-19. Next slide, please. So now we have the news or the media brings out, like information, like how terminal patients or the patients with advanced disease, they struggle to get morphine as an analgesic during the days of lockdown. How the elderly patients suffer from because of the lack of home care, or the physiotherapists in particular, or the nursing professionals in particular, not visiting their home, and what home quarantine means to a person, particularly for women. They are getting, more stuck at home with multitasking. So it has, the COVID-19 has got more of, other aspects than on a physical symptom relief alone. It affects the psychological aspect, the social aspect, and it affects the global economy as a whole. Next slide, please. So coming to principles of symptom control, in palliative care, we focus on the holistic approach. Next. First, we look at evaluation. It is not evaluating how COVID-19 occurred to a patient. See, that may be important for epidemiological purpose. For palliative care specialists or any practicing physician, evaluation of a symptom is very important. How that symptom occurred to that patient, what is the impact of that particular symptom on the patient, what all treatment strategies have been tried, whether it is directly related to COVID or it has got some connection with any premorbid illness status. So evaluation of the symptom is of particular importance. Next, once we finish the evaluation, we have to focus on explaining the same thing to the patient and at least to the family members in the simple language which they can follow. We don't have to follow the medical jargon or the medical language, but in order to make them comply with the medical treatment, we have to use simple language which every family member and the patient can follow. This explanation should focus on how that particular symptom occurred to that patient, what are the treatment strategies which we are going to adopt, what is the impact of that particular treatment strategy on that particular patient. This is especially important when you put a patient on antiviral therapy, for a COVID patient, because no specific medication has proved to be effective in the management of COVID-19. So the particular antiviral therapy, when we start, we are usually taking an undertaking from the patient and the relatives. See, there is no conclusive evidence that that this particular medicine is going to cure your illness, because of the way, from the various data or the evidences available to us, we are trying this particular treatment modality on you. But please understand that this is not a drug trial, but this is the best thing we can do. This is the kind of explanation they require. Next, the management, the appropriate management, which is decided by the treating physician. And management should focus both on pharmacological and non-pharmacological measures. Non-pharmacological measures also will be important, at least in certain symptom control. And when you detail the management strategies, but don't think that everything will be sucked by the patient or the relatives or the family caregivers. Many of the things will be they will be rocketing. They will just go above their head. So many times we have to give written advice. Next, monitoring And we need to monitor the effect of our treatment strategies, whether it was effective, whether it has caused some side effect, whether it has resulted in some toxic effect, whether we have to modify it, and everything we have to monitor regularly. Monitoring essentially focused on repeated and regular review. And next and the last is attention to detail. This is EMA. This is an acronym coined by Robert Tykros, who is a pioneer in the palliative care, palliative medicine. Attention to detail means it encompasses all steps of symptom control, and it is not based on any assumption. We focus on the symptoms which we had attended, and we give attention to symptoms which were not present, and we have to ask for them. Yes, you had come to us with fever, but how do you feel now? Do you have cough now? Are you breathing comfortably? And the symptoms which were not elaborated by the patient also require attention during the next review or the next scheduled meeting. Next. So coming to common symptoms in COVID-19 patients, fever 83 to 99%, cough 59 to 82%, fatigue 44 to 70%, anorexia 40 to 84%, shortness of breath 31 to 40%, sputum production in 20 to 33%, and in myalgia 11 to 35%. What is given beneath is a reference from CDC. So today we are going to focus on fever, cough and secretion, and myalgia. Myalgia means pain. Next, symptom management general guidelines. I again would like to highlight that palliative care guidelines are not substitute for definite treatment guidelines set by Ministry of Health and Family Welfare for the central administration and also for Kerala Government State Health Service. These are to supplement the existing practicing guidelines so as to augment or enhance the symptom control so that we will see the patient live best quality of life as long as he can. So we should strictly adhere to COVID-19 protocol. All the healthcare professionals, starting from the doctor through nurses and even the sanitation worker, they should wear appropriate personal protection equipment. That is a must. There is no substitute for that. Next slide. Coming to fever, it is one of the most common symptoms. It occurs usually 5 days after the exposure to infection. So we can see that our Mr. C also presented with fever, almost 5 days duration. I mean, it occurred for him. It actually occurred after 2 weeks after the exposure. It probably accounts for the incubation period. And when we manage fever, focus on to the non-pharmacological measures as well. Ensure hydration, but we should be vigilant that hydration shouldn't be overzealous. It shouldn't be more than 2 liters per day. This is to avoid unnecessary water logging in our body so that the lungs and the kidney will be unable to expel it. Already parenchyma is in a compromised state once it is affected. So we have to limit the water intake to 2 liters per day. Tepid sponging may be done as appropriate to the ICU protocol. I am not sure because I haven't come across with a COVID patient yet, but before the patient gets admitted to the ICU or in the isolation ward, it may be done. But in the ICU, we have to follow the ICU protocol. Paracetamol is the best and the safest antipyretic for adults. I mean, over 18 years and over. It is safe to administer paracetamol 0.5 gram to 1 gram every 4 to 6 hours. Only thing is that the maximum dose a day shouldn't exceed 4 grams. The maximum permissible dose is 4 grams a day. This is according to NICE guideline, which is recently published on 3rd April 2020. Next slide, please. Coming to pain, these patients will be having myalgia and arthralgia. Here also, we give most importance to paracetamol, which is much less recognized as an analgesic. But remember, it is the safest and best analgesic for patients having myalgia and to an extent arthralgia as well. Because other pain relieving medications or analgesics like NSAIDs and steroids, they have limitations. Because NSAIDs, we know they have lot of side effects. Particularly, many of these patients will be elderly. They have comorbid illnesses. They have, they will be on multiple medications. And on the top of that, NSAIDs also might add to the side effect profile. The safest NSAID, even ibuprofen, is also not devoid of the side effect. Recently, from palliative care setting, I heard a story of patients having intestinal perforation after taking ibuprofen, which is considered to be the safest among all NSAIDs, taken hardly for 5 days, even with full gastric protection with a proton pump inhibitor. So in a patient who is more vulnerable, like in COVID pandemic, side effects of NSAIDs cannot be overlooked. And there is reports and information coming that it lowers immune functions. Like lymphopenia is a very frequent finding in patients with COVID-19. So use of NSAIDs should be very much cautious. I mean, we should do it with utmost caution in COVID-19 pandemic. And there is a report stating that NSAIDs, they boost the function of angiotensin converting enzyme receptors, the enzyme receptors. So this also will worsen the COVID-19 status. And coming to steroids, the patient will be already immunocompromised. So it is not advisable to give steroid as part of treating myalgia or arthralgia. In couple of physicians, they have opined that steroids may be indicated when systemic inflammatory response is seen with other markers. Next slide, please. This is the reference showing the latest reports on NSAIDs, particularly ibuprofen, and its effect on immune system and its utility or usefulness in COVID pandemic. Ibuprofen's anti-inflammatory properties could dampen the immune system, which could slow the recovery process. And again, COVID-19 reduces a key enzyme, a key enzyme that part regulates water and salt concentration in blood and could contribute to pneumonia seen in extreme cases. So ibuprofen, because it also has got an inherent, any NSAID for that matter, would result in salt and water retention. It may aggravate the COVID-19 scenario. Next slide, please. Following that, WHO has come out with a statement that WHO does not recommend against the use of ibuprofen because more reports and more studies are required to confirm the conclusive evidence that ibuprofen must be deleterious while being used in COVID-19 pandemic. But anyway, they have not advised for it, but they are not standing against it also. Anyway, that is controversial, but for the time being, we can stay away from using NSAIDs and also steroids for symptom relief in fever and pain. We can stick on to paracetamol, the time-tested, most user-friendly and most economical analgesic. Next slide, please. And coming to cancer pain, many of our palliative care patients also may get COVID because they are also, in a way, they are immunocompromised. So opioids are the mainstay of treating cancer pain. There is no change to ongoing opioid treatment regimes in the absence of documented changes in pain or function. So opioid changes are warranted if there is a change in the pain pattern or in the pain intensity. Careful monitoring of the patient who are on transdermal opioids like buprenorphine or fentanyl as the rate of absorption may go high with fever because fever produces cutaneous vasodilatation. As a result, absorption of drugs from the transdermal patches can be enhanced. This may result in rapid accumulation of the drug and metabolites in the system, which may lead to toxicity. And while doing all this, beware of altered renal function in the disease trajectory as well. Next slide, please. I am moving. Please let me know. I am in line with the slide change there also. Am I?
Please go on.
Am I?
Please go on.
Okay. Coming to cough, non-pharmacological measures. I mean, most of the non-pharmacological measures, they act as soothing agents, but predominantly they are home remedies. You know, they have been used by our grandmothers or grandfathers for ages. Warm water. Having said that, I am going to emphasize again, this has nothing to do with preventing novel coronavirus infection, because WhatsApp messages have come pouring in, because if you keep on drinking warm water, that will delay and prevent infection. It has got nothing to do with that. Warm water is a soothing agent to your oropharyngeal area. And decoction with dried ginger, pepper and basil leaf, mixture of lemon and honey, these are tested home remedies. And pharmacological measures, when we go ahead with pharmacological measures, always consult with the treating physician, because we shouldn't, compromise or contradict what they are doing. Sometimes they will be doing mucolytics, or they might be giving mucolytics. So the antitussives they are giving should not contradict the action of the mucolytic. So always consult with the treating physician. They might be using antibiotics or many other agents to control cough. So nebulization is better avoided so as to avoid aerosol dispersion and contamination. And cough suppressants which we commonly use are dextromethorphan, which are available as 5 mg lozenges, which may be used at 10 to 20 mg, like 6 hourly to 4 hourly. Dextromethorphan has got multiple mechanisms of action. It is an opioid agonist. It acts on sigma-1 receptors. It is a non-selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. And one of its metabolites, like dextrofan, it blocks a glutamate receptor. So it has got an NMDA receptor blocking activity as well. The NICE guidelines describes using codeine as well, like 15 to 30 mg, 6 hourly to 4 hourly. But when we have to remember that this codeine has to get converted to morphine in our body to have its efficacy. So in 10 to 20% of the individuals, this conversion may be dampened or delayed or may not occur at all. So codeine may remain ineffective in such population. And more than that, codeine is highly constipating and it is more expensive than morphine. And it can cause it has got more addictive potential as well. And in intractable cough, most of the palliative care physicians use morphine 2.5 to 5 mg, either 6 hourly or 4 hourly, depending on the severity of cough. Next slide, please. Secretion. Suction, which is the commonest method available or commonest method employed to reduce secretion in any ICU setting, should be avoided, because again it is health hazardous for the healthcare personnel, and because of the aerosol generation, it may result in disease contamination and spread. Simple position change to facilitate the drainage secretion will be helpful in clearing the oropharyngeal area. And anti-sialagogue may be used if secretions are troublesome. Glycopyrrolate is the best anti-sialagogue in the palliative care scenario, 200 to 400 microgram. 4 hourly, either administered either intravenously or subcutaneously. Oral glycopyrrolate is available, but its efficacy is much less compared to intravenous or subcutaneous route. And we can use even hyoscine butyl bromide, that is Buscopan, atropine 1% ophthalmic solution also. While using anti-sialagogue, we have to be cautious, because too thick secretions will add to symptom burden, because your mouth and oral cavity will be dry and sticky. And xerostomia is really uncomfortable to the patient, and it will facilitate fungal colonization. Next slide, please. So take home message: illness, whether it is acute or chronic, it is a total human experience. Palliative care focuses on quality of life, and palliative care should commence at the time of diagnosis and continues after death of the patient and bereavement support. EMA approach to symptom management. Paracetamol is the safest analgesic and antipyretic. Oral opioids do not require any change unless there is an indication. Morphine functions as an effective antitussive in intractable cough. While using morphine, we have to be conscious that we have to prescribe a laxative, bisacodyl 10 milligram at night. Constipation is the most common side effect associated with morphine. And we may prescribe an antiemetic, either metoclopramide 10 milligram administered twice a day for 3 days, or haloperidol 0.5 milligram to 1.5 milligram administered as a single dose for 3 days. At these doses, both metoclopramide and haloperidol, usually they do not produce extrapyramidal side effects. Anti-sialagogues may be used, but use must be done judiciously. Nebulization and suction should be avoided. I am very sorry for the technical difficulty which had happened from my side, which stole a lot of time. And we have not seen Mr. C after being shifted to an intensive care unit. We hope that we can see him at the end of the series with his symptoms much well controlled. We can see that he and his family is appropriately communicated. His goals of care will be appropriately set, and his triaging was properly done, and his other psychosocial aspects are properly taken care of. Thank you very much for the patient listening. I beg your pardon again for the technical difficulty we had occurred from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, madam. The session is open for discussion. If anybody has any doubts or comments, please raise your hand so that we can unmute you. Dr. Alexina, do you have any question?
No.
Okay. So there is one chat question. Can you please share anti-sialagogue slide again, please?
Sorry?
No, he was asking about the anti-sialagogue slide. Please share the slide.
Anti-sialagogue slide?
Yeah, we will share it.
This is glycolate or pyrrolate, which is usually available in the critical care setting and also in the theatre. And oral tablets are also available as 1 to 2 milligram. They may be given twice or thrice a day, even 4 times a day, but they are much less efficacious in reducing the secretion. So usually we go for, injectable glycopyrrolate, which is available in the critical care setting. One ampule is 0.2 milligram, that is 200 microgram. It's a very potent anti-sialagogue. Usually in the palliative care setting, we use twice a day or maximum thrice a day. Even with 200 microgram thrice a day, it produces significant amount of drying of oral mucosa. So that is the reason why I have stressed when we use anti-sialagogues, we have to be really cautious. A dry, sticky oral cavity, it is quite uncomfortable to the patient, and the sticky secretion can, add to symptom burden.
Thank you, madam. Dr. Kamarul Hassan.
Yes, I am Kamrul from Bangladesh. Madam, I have a doubt. Would you please clarify why nebulization should be avoided? Maybe I missed that point. Would you please again clarify?
No, nebulization and suction, because all these procedures are likely to disperse the oropharyngeal, the laryngotracheal secretions outside. So they are, it's said that nebulization and suction will result in dispersion of aerosols, and it might result in spread or contamination of the infection. So, it is said that actually when you do that, you have to use, if at all you are using, you have to do it in a negative pressure environment so that it will not come out.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
So there is another chat question. Can we use atropine IV?
Atropine IV may be used, but it might result in significant tachycardia because it crosses blood-brain barrier and it results in it results in tachycardia. So these patients might be having some underlying cardiac illness as well. So tachycardia will be really dangerous for those patients, particularly if they have ischemic heart disease. For ischemic heart disease patients, tachycardia is not at all a favorable sign. And again, atropine can produce, if the dose is properly cut, if it is not properly curtailed, it can produce psychosis. It can add to psychosis. Already these patients who are in ICU, they are prone to develop agitation and confusion. So it can add to confusion, and later it may lead to psychosis, ICU psychosis. So it's a last. Glycopyrrolate, it doesn't cross blood-brain barrier, so it is the preferred anti-sialagogue.
Okay, thank you, madam. So there is one comment which says family physician should start conversation regarding end-of-life care in view of current pandemic, specifically with multiple comorbidity population.
I think, Sunil, end-of-life care will be discussed later after the symptom management.
Yeah,
we will be doing that later.
So could you please elaborate on the specific PPE you use for examination and consultation for suspected and confirmed patients in your settings? That was a question from Chamath.
See, that is what these PPEs should be used, according to the setting where you practice. For routine procedures, which a couple of days ago, like previous week, I had attended a webinar or similar Zoom session. N95 masks are required only when you are directly in contact with the patient, particularly when you are doing nebulization or suction or tracheostomy care, intubation, like that kind of thing. Otherwise, for routine care, a 3-layer surgical mask would serve the purpose. For all routine palliative care, examination procedures and the nursing procedures like wound dressing and all those things, a plastic apron or whatever apron you have been using and a 3-layer surgical mask will serve the purpose. That is what I understood from that particular Zoom session. But if you are engaged with patient care, where aerosol generation is a risk, we have to use N95 mask. Regarding other PPE, like if you have goggles, it is always welcome if there is a spillage of secretion and if there is a chance for your eyes getting contaminated and all. Use of PPE, availability of PPE is quite short in our country and it should be reserved for that healthcare professionals and sanitation workers who are working in the front lines for treating and managing COVID patients. For palliative care, for managing palliative care patients, the routine precautions like aprons, masks, gloves, and even the footwear and N95 masks, for patients where aerosol dispersion is a risk, that would suffice. That is from my understanding and from my knowledge after attending the Zoom sessions and the webinars. I don't have any practical experience or exposure in managing a COVID patient.
Okay, thank you, madam. Anybody else has any more questions or comments? Anybody else? Chitra madam, are you there?
I'm here, Sunil.
Do you have any comments?
No, I think Raji, it was very clear and crisp. The slides were also very clear. Very good. I think the concept of palliative care to be integrated with the management for COVID came out very clearly. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So, if there are no more.
One more thing, one more thing, Sunil, if you can share the ebook link now on the chat.
Yeah, that is what.
everyone can download it, and they can use the algorithm for each symptom which is given in the ebook to look into the management of symptoms and the relevance of palliative care in COVID. Please, can you share the link from the website? You can just download and share it. Thanks so much.
We will share it, madam.
Yeah. Someone has asked, can you share a slide of HEMA approach? Raji, Cyril,
Yeah.
can you put that slide of the HEMA?
Okay.
Sunil, these presentations will be shared among the participants, no?
The PowerPoint will be sent to you along with the ebook. Okay. So the PaliCOVID group has created an ebook which covers all the symptom control in COVID-19. So you will be having this presentation along with that. So Dr. Rajshree mainly talked about the relevance of palliative care in COVID-19 because the patient has many problems, including physical, psychological, social, financial, and spiritual problems. So palliative care try to look at this and try to do as much as possible to relieve these symptoms and other sufferings. She also talked about fever, which is very common symptom in COVID-19, and paracetamol is the drug of choice to treat fever because NSAIDs have many side effects, as well as it can cause many other problems, like sometimes it can decrease the immune status and it interacts with some enzymes, and it can cause sodium and water retention. And regarding cough, we can manage non-pharmacologically with a warm saline gargle using honey or ginger, and even pharmacological management like dextromethorphan. It is available as lozenges, and if it is refractory, then as per the decision of the treating physician, we can also use morphine in small doses, 2.5 to 5 milligram, to suppress the cough if it is a very dry irritant cough. Then secretions can use anti-xylogogues like glycopyrrolate, hyacinth butyl bromide, or eye ointment. So pain, the arthralgia or myalgia can be treated with paracetamol because NSAIDs, as we know, has many side effects, and it is also not advised by many guidelines. And opioids has to be continued if the patients are taking opioids, because many patients will be who are having COVID will be with immunocompromised status, and cancer patients are one of those. So we have to continue opioids, like morphine or fentanyl, whichever they were taking previously. And usually no dose change is recommended unless there are some problems with renal function or some other functions. So thank you, Dr. Rajeshri, for your wonderful presentation. Thank you all.
Thank you, Sunil, for helping me out my dear state condition. I learned to use my phone and coordinating with the kids according. Thank you so much. Thank you so much,
madam. So before leaving, can you all please do this feedback which we have launched it. So this is the feedback. So please, so I hope all of you can see the feedback questions. So please do it and at last submit it.
Is it all right?
Yeah.
Shall I quit?
Yeah, you can. But I request,
okay, thank you. Thank you, Sunil.
Thank you.
Thanks to TIPS team. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Vitan.
I request all others to please attempt this feedback questions.